Welcome back to The Other 51, a podcast for writers by writers, where we get all of your favorite writers to spill their secrets and tell what it's like to write books and articles and stuff like that. I am your host, Brian Morris. Thank you for joining me wherever you get your podcast. And today we have two of my favorite people in the world talking about the books that they recently edited together. We've got, coming to us from England, first time on the show, first time I've talked to you in a very long time, unfortunately. Danielle Coombs, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for inviting us. I'm excited to be here.
And friend of the show, the person who started this podcast with me, God, 9 years ago now, if you can believe that, Molly Yanity. Molly, welcome back to the show.
Always a pleasure, Brian.
It is always a pleasure to have you on, and very excited to talk about the books that you guys have edited together. Both of them came out this year, right? Or are they both this year, or was one last year? Both this year. So they were edited volumes about the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup. A lot to get to on this, but the most recent one is Politics, Social Issues, and the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup. Congratulations, you two, on having this out. What's it like having the book out in the world, having spent, all the time putting it together and editing it and coming up with the idea? What's it like to have it, and Danielle, on the shelf behind you, or Molly next to you? What's it like to have the book out in the world and people reading it?
It's great. It's something that Molly and I, we did a book on the 2019 Women's World Cup that we were really, really proud of. And so when this new one came around, we sent out, a call, not really knowing what to expect. And we had so much excitement and enthusiasm about this project. So now that it's done and it has kind of exceeded our goals in terms of having global representation, being able to feature scholarship by and about people from all over the world, it's something that I'm just incredibly proud that we have done. And working with Molly is always my favorite thing to do, because we managed to laugh a lot through the process. And so I think some of that joy comes through when you see kind of what we pulled together.
We'll get to the whole editing process and how that comes together. And one of the reasons I'm excited about this episode is I've talked to a lot of writers over the many years I've been doing this podcast, but this is the first time I've ever talked to people who put together an edited anthology. So kind of that editing situation, but kind of going big picture. Molly, I'll let you start on this one. What is it about, you guys did the book on the 2019 World Cup, but what is it about the 2023 World Cup that had you guys kind of get this idea in the first place, and then to have two books on it?
Well, for me, I was able to go to the 2023 World Cup. I took a group of students to Sydney, Australia. We spent I spent a month there, and so I was just really, really into it. I was super excited, and the idea, we didn't plan. Our initial plan was not to do two books. We just got such. I mean, when we put out the call, there was so much excitement about it that when we started looking at, I mean, I think we had originally 40 chapters, and some of those fell off. Some people had to back out. But when we were looking at it, we were like, this is way too much for one book. Let's break it into two. And so we put our heads together and tried to figure out how to do that. The 2019 World Cup was really special. It was in France. The US won. It was very, especially from our perspectives, it felt very Western. It was that was in large part because of just the domination by the U.S. Megan Rapinoe became a household name. But with the 2023 World Cup, we really saw it become more global. There are more teams involved. And the books represent that. As Danielle mentioned, we have basically representation from every continent other than Antarctica, of course. And when we realized that was happening, we just were like, let's go big, two books, here we go. And it really did. When I didn't get to say this, but we were actually together. I was across the pond visiting my friend Danielle when the politics book showed up in a box at her house through the mail. So we got to open that together, and then we celebrated.
Yeah, really celebrated.
How were the Scissor Sisters, by the way? Very jealous of that show.
It was incredible.
They were so good.
So good.
We can talk about that later.
Yes, Ian McKellen was like right there in front of us, and the combination of Sir Ian McKellen and the Scissor Sisters might have overwhelmed my senses for a while.
Yeah, that was a show I was so excited to see. And then for Danielle to be able to be able to do it with her and my wife, we had so much fun. It was a blast.
So what is it about the two World Cups? Molly, you mentioned you were there, but what is it about the World Cups that kind of captured your attention as scholars, as communication scholars, as women's sports scholars? What, I know it's obviously it's the biggest event, one of the biggest events in women's sports, if not the biggest event. But from a more like from the scholarly standpoint or from the communication standpoint, what is it about those events kind of specifically that's like there's a book here, or there's a collection of stuff to be written about here?
Well, the genesis for the 2019 book actually came from Molly and her wife and I were on a panel at Ohio University where we're all three are alums. And there was this other poor young man on the panel with us who I think got kind of overwhelmed by our enthusiasm for the Women's World Cup. But we were just on a panel for was women's gender. I forget what the acronym is because it's after my time at OU. But it was basically for like the Women's Center. And we were invited to be on this panel. And Molly and I started talking about the ways women take up space. And Megan Rapinoe specifically doing her power pose was a big kind of a spark of discussion. And I think during that panel, we looked at each other, we're like, we need to write about this. And so I think we originally wrote like a paper or something, or a conference presentation. We kind of started off thinking we need to do this. And the more we thought about how the 2019 World Cup felt like kind of a watershed where it really got on radars in ways that they maybe hadn't before, more globally, because this corresponded with women's club soccer taking off in Europe in a really, really big way. And the women's Euro Cup and whatnot had continued to grow. So we decided, let's do this. And again, we kind of sent out a call not knowing what to expect, but we knew we wanted to get perspectives besides our own because so much of this conversation has been dominated by scholars in the global north, in US, Canada, some Europe, and we wanted to make sure we could expand that. So starting in 2019, we really thought there's something here worth looking at, and then it just continued to grow.
And what is so that process of editing an anthology and creating an anthology? Danielle, you kind of hinted at it at the start, but I love both your takes on this. So you start writing this and you have this panel and that. So what's the decision process like? Is something I think about a lot with my own work, and I'm sure a lot of other people do, between I'm going to write a book about this, or we're going to write a book about this, and then no, let's do an anthology of it and edit an anthology. What was that decision process for you guys like, and how did you come to that?
Danielle has actually written full books herself, but I never have. Uh I've only edited the collections. And so for me, I had just become like we started working on that um in 2020, I think right before the pandemic hit, if I'm correct. And when we started, we're like, we've got a book. Like and we did start talking about, do we, and I don't actually remember if there was a moment where like let's just put out a call, or do we want to do this? I don't know that we had that conversation, but I remember being a little overwhelmed at that time. So I'd just become a department chair when I was still at Quinnipiac, and it just felt like we can get this done. I think it might have been about workload. I mean, it's still a lot. It's still a lot of work, and working with other people, and enforcing deadlines, and talking about style, and all that kind of thing. But uh, I think that's how it came about. And then with the 2023 books that just came out this spring and summer, um, that was literally about trying to get as many different perspectives in the book as we could. That was actually very consciously we made that decision.
I think that the pandemic did have a big impact on how we wanted to approach it. One thing that I found really interesting is when you look at how the pandemic affected academic scholarship. A lot of male scholars found that their productivity skyrocketed, whereas women scholars tended to have a much different experience with it. And certainly I did. because I have two children and all of a sudden, we're at home, I'm trying to teach, we're adapting everything. And so I think having the chance to really stop and reflect on what can we actually do, it kind of forced that issue on us. And to Molly's point, we had a ton that was going on. And so for the 2019 one, we were approached by an editor, I think at Palgrave Macmillan, who was the publisher for the first volume. And she asked if we'd be interested in writing it. And Molly and I had a really frank discussion about what capacity do we have. And then for the second one, it was a much more like, this really worked well. How do we grow this? And I think it's something that when we presented it to Routledge, who I've worked with before with a lot of success, they were really excited that we could have that global perspective on it, which is harder to do when you're writing from your own point of view.
Do you think being at the stage in your careers that you are kind of helped? How much did that influence that decision to not kind of like? I can imagine being a younger scholar or like not tenured or just joining the academia and being like, oh no, I got to write this whole book and this is going to be me. But you guys, you know, being where you were professionally and personally, obviously during the pandemic, kind of helped shape that. How much did that shape that decision?
One thing I've been very conscious of is that we have a responsibility as senior scholars who are also women to help lift the voices of people who have a bigger challenge getting published, and finding opportunities to help mentor more junior people or people who are not from the global north, who don't have the same resources and access. And that's something that I think we take quite seriously in terms of how we position ourselves within academia. And this was a big part of what we've tried to do with this work, and very consciously doing that. Sorry, Miles, what were you saying?
No, that was really, I was going into the same place, so we're fine.
Cool. So let's talk about this specific. Let's talk about this
This is why
specific
we
book,
work well together, Brian.
right?
We share a brain, basically.
We so let's talk about the specific books on the 2023 World Cup, and let's start with the process too. So you kind of realize, the 2023 World Cup happens. Molly, you're there. You have this idea for the book. What's the process like for getting it to a publisher? Like, do you the proposal stage and like from the let's do what we did 2019, but let's examine 2023 for all the reasons you said. What's step one, step two from that for you guys? What was that? What did that look like?
Well, we decided to go with Routledge because I had a relationship with the editor, a senior acquisitions editor there, who had approached Annie Osborne and me about editing the Routledge handbook on sport fans and fandom. And so we had already done a handbook with him. And so we basically pitched it to Simon as two books. And he was like, yeah, let's do it. And it was weird timing because other colleagues of ours had already had two books accepted on the same topic. And so we were kind of like, which Molly contributed to, and some of the other editors contributed to ours. So we wanted to make sure we weren't going to overload it. So we really had to be conscious of positioning. But once we could all see what we were doing, we had very different points of view, and we're bringing different things to the table. So Simon Whitmore, our editor at Routledge, is someone who we've had a relationship with, which really helped, I think, kind of get this process moving pretty quickly.
For me, one of the things that I thought was really just interesting in that initial part, and Danielle, correct me if I'm wrong, but we just gave them, like, we literally gave them the table of contents. I don't even think we had to provide early chapters for it, which was in the 2019 book we did. We had, a couple chapters, I believe. We just gave them the table of contents and told them where we wanted to go with it, which is not usual, but Danielle's relationship with Simon really played into that role. And then I think we cranked on. I mean, I remember the having mine. I thought that I would have mine done quickly, right? You think you're real ambitious. You're like, let's get this, and I mean, we started getting people's chapters in, abstracts, everything, and we went from there. There was very little. The editors at Routledge, they really didn't ask for a lot from us. Like everything that we were giving them, they're like, this is great, this is great. And so it was really, really smooth from that perspective. When I really expected there to be some more. And I mean, I think a little bit of that has to do with Danielle's previous work and her reputation, as being such a, you know, Danielle is very gifted and very smart, so they 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 were ready for what we were going to do without, they didn't give us a whole lot of direction or critique. It was just sort of, okay, just make sure this is different from these. That was it.
And we were Molly and I both have good reputations, and I think the 2019 book had been received so positively. So when they sent the proposal out to reviewers, the feedback was very much like these are the two people to do it.
Mhm.
And so I think that gave them that kind of reinforced that we were really well positioned to do this work and that we would be able to get it done. I was kind of a known quantity. Um, and Molly, I think, has with Rutledge specifically. And then the work that we had done was so well received that it seemed pretty clear that it was a good fit.
What's the submission process like? And can you tell me a little bit about there's got to be an art in creating the call for submissions because that call having written for anthologies like a lot of us, that really shapes, as someone who's submitting, that shapes what I'm gonna thinking about writing or what thinking about submitting. So what was that like in creating the call for submissions just to start the process of getting people? How did that look? What was that like?
Yeah, I actually just looked at the call before we got on this because I didn't remember, But the thing that was so funny, it was pretty broad because at first we did not realize that there would be two other Women's World Cup volumes coming out as well. So we had this broad, we had a really broad call. I mean, I thought it was well written, but it was still just like, hey, what are you thinking about around the Women's World Cup? And we did it, the 2019, we did that call after the World Cup. We did this one before
Okay.
it started. Okay, which was like, so to give people the idea of like if they wanted to look at something specific. But we did know that we wanted it to be global in nature. That was one thing that we were like, this is important this time that we really, swing those doors open to the world to better look at this tournament more broadly. So that call was broad, and and again, Brian, it was one of those things where when we started getting the abstracts, they were coming in so quickly, and there were so many of them that we were just like, we'd get on a Zoom call and be like, can you believe we have this many? I mean, it was, and from some really, some great scholars from all over the world. And we were like, oh my gosh, here's this guy from Burkina Faso who wants to write in this. We're like, what the heck, right? I mean, it was wild. So, that process was really, that was fun because it was just, it's like opening Christmas presents every time you open your email.
Yeah.
Do you remember how many submissions you got?
It was around 45, I think.
I think it was 42. We ended up with 30 in the book, and there were a few that were like, we don't think this fits. And then I think there were three or four where the people were just like, hey, I'm overwhelmed and I've got to back out. And it was that was that was depressing a little bit because a couple of those people were like, damn, that was going to be a really good chapter. I wish they would have seen it through, and some scholars who we were really excited to work with, but it didn't work out.
There's always 2027.
Yeah.
What what is the Danielle, I'll start with you on this one. What is the editing process like for you two as the editors of this? Because you work with an editor at your publisher, but like as the kind of editors of this anthology, what's the role you guys play? Post submit when they submit, and this is going to fit. Now, what's the relationship you guys play with both the writers and then the editor at the publisher?
Well, I am incredibly lucky that Molly has the patience of a saint and is willing to work with me on these projects because she is very buttoned up and on top of things. And I am not. And in the middle of this process, my husband and I decided that we were going to move our family, including our two children, to England. So we made the decision in like June of 2023. We moved in April of 2024. So in the middle of all this, my family moved internationally, which is a lot, and I left a job I'd been very happy at for 16 years. So I had a ton going on. So Molly has very much been kind of the driving force behind making sure things actually get done. And so I think that's something that I'm grateful for. And it points to why it's so important to have a co-editor that you trust because, and because we have a friendship, she's not afraid to be like, what are you doing? And then I'd be like, hi, I miss you. I'm going to work right now. So we have that kind of friendship that she knows how to push me in ways that work. And my husband and I joke that Molly is better at getting me to do stuff than anyone. And so she kind of knows how to motivate me. But I think that we had so much excitement around this project that it kept it kind of fresh for us. Like it kept it on our radar and kept us thinking about it. The challenge for me in my particular book was I had a lot of uh, authors who were putting together really exciting work, but there was a bit of a language gap. And so trying to figure out how to work with those authors to get it so it was kind of written in a way that was understandable, that was sharing the points that they wanted, that was properly cited, because we have different expectations for citations and for the kind of verification of information. So there was a lot of labor on that end in terms of really helping ensure that the scholarship was polished and presented in a way that we would all be really, really proud of. And so my book, part of the reason it took a little bit longer was because we had a few more revision cycles on some of the chapters, which we knew going in. When we got the abstracts, we kind of knew this is what the process is going to be like. And we want to do that because we're so invested in having this global perspective on our work. So that was, I think, a big part of what I worked on this time was having that polishing process be really baked in ways I haven't experienced when I've worked on collections that didn't have the same global reach that this did. Miles, how about you?
Yeah, it's funny because there are a lot of times I'm like, okay, I know you're moving, I know you just started a new job, but let's go. Come on, come on. And and we're being silly about this right now, but the thing is that if we never missed a deadline, right? We did not miss a deadline. Um we moved the one volume out a little bit because what she just explained, but we do work really well together, and we have this is the honest truth. We have not had one conversation through the publishing three books that I would consider to be contentious or where we were not on the same page, anything like that. And that has not happened. Um, and I also know that that I can be like, hey, let's go. Like we really need to get this going now. And Danielle's gonna be, you're right. I'm gonna just buckle down and I'll get this. So that's amazing. I mean, that is an amazing working relationship. Um, for my editing, when the chapters start coming in, um, the people who meet your deadline, right? And this is like one of those things where, hey, I tell all the authors that we have to have something in July 1st, when really our publisher has said August 1st, right? Like you add those cushions in. So the people who get things in right away, I can read, I can really start to conceptualize where it's going to go, what we need to do with it. Maybe someone had a great title and this is what we thought, but hey, Danielle, actually, I think it's going to be better suited for the politics book as opposed to the communications book. Um, I think, honestly, this is so silly, but my biggest challenge with this book was the index, which is the biggest pain in the ass ever. But getting the index where if we are talking about a country as opposed to a team, like if I wrote a chapter in the communications book on the Matildas, and so I'm continually calling it, Australia, right? I'm talking about the team, Australia, but then also talking about Australia as the place, right? So that's like deciphering that through all the chapters. It was so hard for me for some reason. But it also made me like really go through this thing with a fine-tooth comb, and make sure that what we were trying to do got across. And for me, what I was ultimately trying to do is, and there's the whole thing of why do women athletes have to be so inspirational? I get that conversation we have. It is labor for women, but it's also that's why I do this, right? That's why I'm involved in this. That's why this is my area of research and why I really love this is because I was one of those young people who was endlessly inspired by female athletes and by women's sport. And I believe in the power of that. So every single thing I'm reading, and what does branding have to do with it? Or what does, what does podcasting have to do with it? Like that's how we get it. That's how, that's how young people particularly are inspired, and that's why how they're moved by women's sport. And that's so for me, that was the just trying to make sure that I had that thread in every chapter I read, every chapter, like to make sure that that was the thing that tied it all together. I had to keep that in mind in places where, where I wasn't sure it was there, but ultimately I would find it. So for me, that's what was going on. And we do things really separately. Like Danielle and I work very separately.
And just to put a fine point on the Molly Get Stuff Done, because she does that with me too whenever we do anything together. But this very podcast, we've been kind of going back and forth and negotiating dates and summers and time zone changes and all that. And then finally Monday this week, Molly sends an email like, guys, are we recording? When are we doing this? Let's do it. And okay, yes, well, okay, let's do it. Let's get it on the calendar. So thank you for
Oh yeah, we're gonna do that, aren't we? Oh yeah.
Getting towards the end here, but I wanted to give each of you a chance to call out a piece from either one of the books. It doesn't have to be the most recent one, but is there one that you got from uh, a, a a part of the world, a scholar from a part of the world, not from the global north? Because you mentioned many times how important that is for you guys in this book. That now I want to say surprised you, but that stands out, that made you think of something with the World Cup in a different way, that made you look at an aspect of the event or the coverage or the politics of it, or just something that really stands out to you as a this is why it was so important to have these other voices. That's something you're not going to get from somebody from the U.S. or Canada. Is there one that you want to give you guys each a chance to call one out that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I could go first. There were a few that really were excellent in my mind. But the one I was thinking of when you asked this question is there's one on the Filipinas, which is the women's team from the Philippines, which is mostly made up of diasporic Filipinas. And so women who don't live or didn't grow up in the Philippines. So looking at what does it mean to be Filipina? What does it mean to represent a country that you did not grow up in? And the community I grew up in Ohio, had a large representation of Filipinos, Filipino expats. And, my one of my really close friends that I've maintained a close friendship with is Filipina. And so to sort of think about how that's informed her identity, and then to see that pulled together in this way meant a lot to me. And I think it means a lot to her, because it's something that I think you often don't think about, these very small nations that don't necessarily have a strong footballing tradition, but still want to be part of this global experience, how they draw from talent, how they draw from around the world, and how they continue to connect. And now that I've moved internationally, I'm particularly interested in how sport keeps us connected to home countries, to home cultures. And I think that chapter, which the full title, The Filipinas Writing World Cup History and Contestations on Gender, Race, and Nationality in Philippine Sport, by Setwinder Rihal. It was something that I felt was just really beautifully done in terms of thinking about how identity and nationalism kind of connect and intersect.
The one that I would point out is a piece by Francisco Betrigo Castillo from South America, from Brazil specifically. And I'm sorry, not Colombia. Boo. Um, and Colombia made history on the pitch at the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup, but came up short in the digital space. So really looking at how the websites of major Colombian news and sports networks um, presented the World Cup. And what this is one of the things that I had done with the students that I took to Sydney before we went. The students did deep dives into the media environments of all of the countries we would see play, and it's interesting, like we did not see the U.S. play. So it was pretty, which was wild but really fun. But Colombia made this great run in the World Cup, advanced to, I want to say, the quarterfinals. And Linda Castillo became a star. Like it was just Caicedo became a star, and it was really fun to watch them play. But then to get Francisco's perspective of what that coverage looked like back home was really, really interesting to me. And also just um it was really well done. I mean, and there was, I mean, he is not a, English is clearly not his first language, and the work that he did to make this chapter um very readable in English was I can't even imagine how that had to have gone. I mean, so props to Francisco because it was a great chapter.
So we'll get you guys out of here with the with how I end every episode because great writing comes from great reading. You guys know you can't be a great writer if you're not a great reader. So asking you both, what is the best thing you've read lately?
I have read so much lately, Brian, that I'm trying to like narrow one down
I
right
see your
now.
Instagram. I know how much
I
you read in the
know.
summer.
That's my favorite thing to do in the summer.
I'm in the middle of reading Great Big Beautiful Summer by Emily Henry, which has nothing to do with anything academic. But I like to read I like to read fun stuff. And I will say in academic work, I've been reading The Creativity Code. You can see my little bookmark in it. The Creativity Code by Marcus de Sautoy. And this has been a really interesting book about machines and creativity.
Hmm.
So, as I am trying to control my panic over AI and what that means for us and our futures, this has been kind of a helpful book in helping me think a little bit about how we can use it for creativity.
I'm going to go with Brian. This was actually a little, it recently won the Pulitzer, but James by Percival Everett.
Hmm?
That was freaking fantastic. And if have you guys read that by any chance?
Not yet, no.
Okay, it is written, it's a take on the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but written from Jim the slave's perspective. And it is so good. It is so good.
I'm
Beautifully
gonna check
written.
that out now.
And I'm gonna be honest, the last couple of things that I've read have been total beach reads. I'm gearing up for a big project right now that I've just started that is not with Danielle, which is sad, but it is like I'm branching out a little there and getting ready for that and some of the stuff, some toxic masculinity reading and things like that. So the beach reads have given my brain a little space to breathe and relax.
The beach reads are great. I'll recommend Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Her new book. It is so good. My wife read.
Has she written anything bad?
I don't think so,
Okay.
but no, this is. I read it in less than 24 hours, and it's a full novel length. I read it in less than 24 hours, and my wife thinks it might be the best book she's ever read. It
Oh wow.
was,
Wow.
yeah,
It
it's
it's on my library it's on my library reserve,
that
so I can't wait to get that one.
James is on mine. I'm waiting. I'll probably be waiting 6 years to get it from the library at this point, but it's fine.
Well, one more to add to your list. Have you read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow?
So good. Oh
That
my
is
God.
excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, okay, so because we're going on down this rabbit hole really quickly, Brian. Hey, so tomorrow, did any of you ever read The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay by Michael
Yes.
Chabot?
No.
Tomorrow reminded me of that book. Like
Oh,
I really felt that kind of like the same sort of style and the friendship. And that's one of my all-time favorite books, The Cavalier and Clay.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, they kind of feel like they're like on the same plane or something like that.
Yeah,
Like they're
yeah.
not the
There's something
same,
that's
but yeah.
like with Tomorrow being about the video games, that the Cavalier and Clay was comics.
Hmm.
So like it just had this sort of same feel to me about it. Anyway,
Anyway, so is there going to be a 2027 anthology from the World Cup?
I hope.
probably.
Put you guys on the
Yeah.
spot right here.
I mean, the thing is, I feel like uh, there will continue to be a need for this kind of work and to have these kinds of spaces. And I think the fact that publishing has gotten so hard for people who are not from the global north in many ways, because if you have to pay money to have your work published in open access journals, or there's an expectation that you present at conferences, and getting a visa is hard, and da da da. It's hard to build some of these global networks. And I think this provides a really good space for people to be able to do that. And I'm glad that Molly and I get the chance to be helping push that forward.
Yeah, I also think as long as there's something new to say or to learn that we would like to continue doing this. And my biggest um, concern or thing and Danielle and I've talked about this a little bit is watching what's happening politically in the US and how that aligns with the growth of women's sports. And they're not two things that can happen congruently, right? They So, Donald Trump putting weird tariffs on Brazil because of their how they're treating Bolsonaro, right? Like, okay, well, we're about ready to send our best female athletes to our best female soccer players to Brazil and fans that will go to Brazil. What's that going to look like too? So taking that, what Danielle's talking about, the more of a global perspective, but the US's space, role in all this is really shifting, and watching what that will do and how we might be able to study that could also be really interesting.
Well, and related to that, I co-edit a rapid response Olympics project with a team that started at Bournemouth University in the UK, but Mike Butterworth and Mike Devlin are part of this team. And Dan from Bournemouth, an editor from Israel, and I all went to UT Austin in February to do this panel to talk about our work. And Texas had just said you can't talk about DEI in classes. Like, I'm kind of broadly characterizing what they said you can and can't do. And my immediate statement was, you can't do this kind of scholarship and not talk about things related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, just because the US doesn't want to do it doesn't mean that it's not important anymore, and that people aren't concerned about it globally. I think as scholars, I'm very concerned about what's going to happen with the Olympics in LA, what's going to happen with the World Cup. Like, will the US be able to host these things? Is it safe for people to come as athletes? They just, I believe, refused visas for the Cuban volleyball team. The US doesn't get to pick and choose who gets to be part of these global games. And so can it host there? So these questions just get more and more important as we move forward.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how you guys try to answer them and address them and get people to talk about them. So as always, guys, this has been wonderful. Thank you for taking the time and the work you guys do.
Thanks for having us, Brian.
Thanks so much, Brian.
Thanks for listening to The Other 51. Special thanks to Danielle and Molly for joining me this week. You can find links to their books and all the books that we seriously nerded out over in the show notes for this episode. Our graphic design is by Jen Moritz. Ellie Moritz wrote our theme music. I'm Brian, and I'll talk to you next time.